All right, so having heard all of that, Jo, what attracted you to this role?
My being interviewed again.
Yeah,
or
you are
something.
being interviewed.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'll be totally honest with you. It was not in my mind at all to become chief exec of the staff college. I've been working with the college as an associate since the September 2017. And I knew that the board were looking for a new chief executive, but I'd just finished being a director for 15 years, and part of my promise to myself was that I wasn't going to run anything anymore. You know, I'd sort of done my time as a director, thoroughly enjoyed it, but I wanted to do some different things. Unbeknown to me, a certain gentleman to my left had other ideas, and so I didn't appreciate until a little bit later that some of the conversations that were being had with me, including with Roger Bushell, who was sort of principal associate with the college and who I was doing a lot of work with, were all designed to sort of suss me out for and you know, guide me towards seeing this as a superb opportunity. And so I didn't put in for the job at all. Roll forward a few months, and I had a conversation first with Anton and then with Martin Pratt about would I be at all interested in becoming chief exec, because although there'd been some really good people interested, one of the things that they were finding was that people were wanting to take the college in one direction or another and not across the full gamut of children's services. And I'm very proud children's services professional and absolutely get the sort of power and influence of children's services organisations as their ability to champion children across all facets that affect children. So they were sort of very, very interested in that perspective, plus my experience as a director. And after a process of attrition, is the only way to describe it, very nice attrition, but nonetheless they were persistent, I sort of came around to the way of thinking that actually I owed a lot to the college professionally. It was fascinating hearing Anton talk about the college starting in 1999, because I was an education officer at that time. I remember the college starting, and I remember being slightly miffed about the idea that it would offer master's degrees in those early days, partly because I had self-funded a master's that I was in the process of finishing. And I was thinking, oh, for God's sake, if I'd just waited, I could have done this. But by the same token, reeling back, what was happening in 1999? Well, there was a solar eclipse in the UK, weirdly spooky for timing. But we were in the era of grant-maintained schools had come into place, and that was altering the whole sort of relationship between local authorities and schools. The health system was going through one of its multiple restructures. Primary care trusts were due to start, so we were...
Déjà vu?
Oh, absolutely, totally. So we were getting into the whole world of providers and commissioners and what it would be like working with different organisations and having to strike new alliances. We had... Local Government Act 2000 was coming into play, that was introducing leaders and cabinets away from the old committee systems, and so we were all learning about new things. And it's some of the things, you say déjà vu. I don't keep much paperwork, so I haven't got a nice little set of handouts like Anton has. But I did come across a presentation that I made to a group of head teachers in October 1999 the other day, and it was around issues that they were experiencing in relation to special educational needs and disability. And I could absolutely use that presentation today, because it was about there aren't enough resources, we're having to exclude children, we can't get services. everything's too slow, etc., etc., etc. And through that and through the development of the college, as I said earlier, I was one of the first directors of children's services. I came from an education background, was really fumbling around in relation to children's social care, and understanding that and the very different leadership approaches where education for many years had been absolutely in that the operational management happens in the organisations and the authority plays a strategic influencing role and championing role, whereas with social care it was much more hands-on operational leadership and management. So you almost had to split yourself in two until you got your head around with it. And I totally benefited from what I and many others have still described to this day as best professional development ever had in my life through the Director of Children's Services programme that the college in partnership with others delivered, and it was just on another scale. And I always felt that the college was an organisation that was there for you. It had your back. It wouldn't take any prisoners. It would be a critically challenging, really force you to think. But it took you into spaces of thinking. It created spaces of thinking and connection that nowhere else did at that time. And it helped me and so many other people, really think through really difficult times, really positive times. And I just thought, actually, I owe a lot to the college, and it's an organisation that I fully believe in. I believe in its integrity, I believe in its production values, I totally believe in sort of systems leadership and leading by influence and humble leadership and all those concepts. And actually it would be interesting to be running a not-for-profit organisation and seeing how different that is from local government, which you must have experienced very much. And what clinched it for me in the end was Martin said, well, why don't you try it for a year? And he actually said, and just have fun with it. And just make sure that if you don't want to do that, just be honest with yourself about why you're saying no. And I went away from that and I thought, well, what have I got to lose? And then I also confronted the fact, part of the reason I didn't want to do it was because I was scared of it. Because the college was this massive organisation in my head that had massive influence, and yet who was I to run it? So I had that real imposter syndrome thing as well. So as a result of that, I said, okay, I'll do it for a year initially. And ended up doing it for 3.5 years, and it was the best time ever. So enjoyed it. Not least because of both the foundations that Anton had created with it, but also there was stuff that I could really do with it. The college was in a stage of its development where it needed to move on. And Anton was hugely generous in terms of, he stayed on as strategic advisor. He also became our international correspondent, I think. He led Scotland and Wales during that time. Yes. But he and I, got on together and both had sort of confidence in each other, and we're also very open with each other about, well, this strategic advisor bit could work or it might not work, but let's be open with each other if it isn't. So So
during the period that you were chief exec, then sort of is that the period when women in leadership came into being as well?
Yeah. So when I took over, we didn't have the government grants had all sort of gone completely out the window. All the stuff that Anton spoke about, the department and the ministers were in a very different space to where they had been about supporting anything to do with development within local authorities beyond social care leadership. So there were whole swathes of the children's services world that wasn't getting very much input at all, and organisations like CWDC had gone and so on. And so the college was back on a funding model which was subscription model. which was by, at that point, individual local authorities, and also the income it gained from any commissioned work, bespoke work. So part of my remit, and I was looking back at the first 6 months, first year stuff, what was agreed with the board would be a combination of keeping the show on the road, because obviously we had commissions programmes already in place, and we were still running Black and Asian Leadership Initiative, Bali, and the college's own Aspirant Directors programme, both of which were massively oversubscribed. We had a turnover of £250,000, but we had £1 million reserves in the bank that had been built up over time, so we were a very stable organisation. So it's a combination of keep the show on the road, but also do a load of research to reposition the college to meet the sort of future demands, and ensure that it remained a well-trusted, stable, sustainable organisation. So I went on a very merry round of conversations and interviews, visited all the regions, because new regional alliances had only relatively recently come into place, so regional improvement alliances. So met up with all of them, met various partners. So Anton had developed really strong relationships with organisations like Penna, Royal Society of Arts. We had a memorandum of understanding with various other organisations as well. The relationship with government, just because of the nature of what was going on in government, was not as prevalent at that point. It had gone through a real, they'd sort of backed off the conversation. We'd still retained a connection, but it wasn't a particularly lively one. And then I also hooked up with some new organisations as well. That the What Works Centre Social Care had just come into place, so joined their advisory group, Early Intervention Foundation, people like Gateby Sanderson and so on, Solace, that sort of thing. And at that, it was really interesting. The research then, it sort of split into three camps really. There was particularly three local authorities. There were local authorities that had known and loved the college, who would absolutely die in a ditch over it. Just the best thing ever, and bought repeat business. There was then a group who felt that, and I remember Anton and I being absolutely incandescent by this, felt that the college was just too theoretical. That was the thing, just too theoretical. And someone actually said to me, and isn't all the schools work just a distraction? What's that to do with children's services? Which was fascinating, given the role of children's services, and in particular the role of DCSs and their partners. And then there was a group that had no idea that the college even existed, looked totally surprised at it. So it was a really interesting piece of work. The thing that shone through, particularly through partner organisations, was that the college, through all its developments, was seen as an incredibly trusted partner, and was an organisation that people really wanted to do business with and wanted to be associated with. And of course you can't magic that sort of reputation up out of nothing. So that was massively important then, and the future development of the college was about maintaining those relationships but building new ones. And as a result of that, the sort of following three years was really about building new networks, new partnerships, identifying new business opportunities, and really growing the college, but making sound use of those reserves in order to develop the organisation further. And in that period, we absolutely grew Bali. We started off by doubling it, and then we expanded it to an alumni offer, and then it got bigger and bigger to try and meet demand. We brought on a lot of new associates, and then developed bespoke offers through that, and did the Mira and colleagues did the Leading in Colour publication, where we built on Anton's point that what was blocking a lot of black and global majority colleagues was lack of confidence to move into strategic roles. We picked up the other side of that story, which was, and also the role of white leaders in creating an environment to enable people to progress. It wasn't all on global majority colleagues to make this change. actually it was the whole system, and in particular the role of white leaders in creating change. So we developed that. In bringing on new associates, we also developed our Women in Leadership programme, which is developing really well. And we also started advising government, and towards the end of my time won the contract for the new aspirant director programme and directors. And just ahead of me leaving, we experienced COVID.
So when you look back as people who've been, and to your times, and then look at the staff, because you're both still in contact with Staff College, still very much involved with us. How do you see that sort of arc of development and growth? I mean, it must be most pronounced for you.
I do. I mean, while you were talking before, I made a note here that very early on in my conversations with David Cracknell, the first chair of the board, and we were trying to kind of learn and understand what are we creating here and why. And he said, well, you need to remember that the purpose of the college is to do the thinking on behalf of the sector, because they're busy doing. And I think that thread of being ahead, as you said, ahead of the curve, is that notion and commitment, doing the thinking, because it's that thinking about stuff that enables the college to nudge and create those spaces where people do their own work. But our job is to create that opportunity, and I think both of you, feels to me, have continued with that. The other point I'd make is, as the college has grown, its diversity has grown, both in its own workforce and in the work. And I think part of that also is because Manchester is a very diverse city, so your workforce is already very diverse. It was less so when we were based in Nottingham, so it would have been much more difficult, and when we recruited there was far less diversity of background that you build on here. So I see a growth of thinking, of opportunities, greater diversity, but nevertheless still a commitment to the original construct, which is being at the forefront of thinking for colleagues, because it's through that they reflect on their own practice best. And secondly, new frontiers, new materials. So the work we're doing on future schooling, for example, there's a thread from that early work in the kind of 2003 phase, and that focus on education and school improvement, to the work through children's services and embracing social care side of work, and now being at the forefront of saying, no, the whole system has to work for children. And I think the college is solidly in that space, so thank you for that legacy.
Yeah, to add to that, because I totally agree with that. I think something that's really pronounced through all the stages of development is that, what you said, Jane, that enduring sense of value, and that enduring sense of, no matter what's going on, there's some key facets of leadership. It doesn't matter if the context is changing. Actually, these facets of leadership are what makes or break, people and situations. And I think not each of us has been fortunate, I think, to be working with people that have acted almost like elders and support each other, so you can do your own thing, but none of us have brought in a massive ideological change and just thrown babies out with bathwaters, and sort of recognise that actually this is important stuff that endures. Here are some new things, and I really want to hear about the new stuff you've brought in, because you've brought in loads of new, really, really interesting stuff, Jane. But it's built on that bedrock, and I think that's really important. And there's a bit of leadership learning. But my thing with a lot of people, particularly when they go into improvement situations, is honour the past. Don't diss the past, because it's part of people's context.
And understand the past.
And understand it, yeah.
Because it's part of the context.
Yeah.
It's a bit like when we work with colleagues from a non-education background, as a DCS, understanding the history of the relationship between schools
Yeah.
and the local authority is critical. And I liken it by you're going to cross a pond which is crystal clear
Yeah.
when you step in. By the time you come out the other end, it's no longer, there's a trail of kind of
Yeah.
murky water. And I think relationships and history matter.
Yeah.
So you're right, that notion of going in and dissing it wouldn't work.
No.
Our work just wouldn't work
No.
if we dismissed all of that.
No.